Thank you for tuning in to the Student Organization Summit. Make sure to follow us on social media and check out the many other videos on this channel about working with and advising student organizations. And now, please enjoy your workshop.
Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea Weiner and I'm so excited to talk with you all today about my presentation, which is all on my LEAD Summer Program initiative. I do want to mention that this is a pre-recorded session, but I am going to hop on at the end with a live Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to jot them down and I will be logging on at the end to make sure to be able to answer all of those questions. So what I want to talk with you all about today is do some introduction. So who am I? Introduce myself. Talk about the background of the LEAD Summer Program. Why was this program created and what are some of the successes of it? An outline of the program. So what did I actually cover in the LEAD Summer Program with my students? A deep dive into the workshop. So the different topics that we talked about, as well as a screenshot of some of the presentations that I had. Talk about the cohort versus individual track. And this is something that made the LEAD Summer Program pretty unique, was that the students got to choose which track they wanted to be on. Discuss any feedback and changes that I would have for the program. So we always give an assessment to our students to ask for feedback. So I'm going to share some of those changes that they had requested, as well as some of the changes that I would implement if I were to do this again. And then some great ways to stay connected. So first, who am I? As I mentioned, my name is Chelsea Weiner. I currently work at San Diego State University, but before that, I got my bachelor's in psychology with a minor in business from Sonoma State University, which is in Northern California. I then moved to San Diego to get my master's in educational leadership from San Diego State University. And there I started my career as a student life advisor. I work specifically with our leadership and community service programs. So I get to plan some of our fun events like our leadership retreat, leadership conferences, our workshops. I advise for our leadership certificate and assist with teaching within our leadership minor. I also I'm in charge of tracking all of the community service opportunities and hours that students complete. And I also coordinate our service learning program. So I have a great job that really connects me with leadership and service when it comes to our students. And I've been working since 2013. So I'm coming on my 7th year in the job full time. So now to talk a little bit about the LEAD Summer Program. So LEAD does stand for Leadership, Exploration, and Development. I really wanted it to be something that the students would be able to put on their resume. So I didn't want to give it a cheesy name, wanted to give it something that if they really wanted to spotlight that it would sound legitimate. And it was over the summer. So that's how we came up with the LEAD Summer Program. So as I mentioned, I work at San Diego State University, which is a large public university within the Cal State University system. So our demographics is that we are a large public serving institution. We have a good mix of residential students plus commuter students. My office within Student Life and Leadership works with commuter students, so we're very connected with them. And the students were going virtual, as many of your students were, I'm sure, starting in March. The transition was pretty tough for them. Oftentimes they were thinking that they were still going to be on campus, that it was just going to be a month or two, as I'm sure your students experienced. Continued to get the news that we were moving virtual up until the fall. So our fall semester, which we're currently in, obviously, has all been virtual. Our spring semester is going to be very heavily virtual as well. The reactions from students were pretty mixed. A large majority of the students were upset and didn't want to be virtual. So the morale that we saw was pretty low. A few students, of course, were fine with it. But we saw that some of them had some struggles with wanting to stay connected in the virtual space. I got really motivated to have the LEAD program because we went virtual, as I mentioned, in March, and then the end of March to beginning of April is when we had our spring break. And I had planned a week-long series called Spring Break Leadership Spring Training, trying to play along with the baseball spring training theme. And we had a week-long virtual leadership series, and the students were really involved. We had great attendance for that. And some of the reactions that they had given us were, this is the only reason I got out of bed this morning. Of course, there were other issues that we addressed when they had mentioned things like that, but we realized that some of them were really striving to find opportunities to connect in the virtual space, and they were really appreciative that we were having these opportunities for them. As I mentioned, others were having Zoom fatigue, didn't want anything more over Zoom, so we had seen that. And we had seen students struggling in their classes to stay connected. A lot of that sense of belonging had gone away, and the students were really feeling disconnected from students and faculty and staff on campus. From the staff perspective, we had seen a wide mix of successful and unsuccessful programs that were happening in the virtual space. I lead SDSU's Programming Consortium, which is when staff come together to talk about the different programs that take place. Obviously, these ones were more in the virtual space last spring. And we had seen that some staff members had had 1 or 2 students attending their events or workshops, and some had an overwhelming amount that were able to attend versus even more than when they were in person. So we had seen some successful and unsuccessful programs happen. The ones that I was helping to plan through our leadership certificate program, we had seen actually be pretty successful. These students wanted to focus on their professional development, which of course made our hearts so happy. We were so glad that they were taking that time for themselves. So we saw an increase in our enrollment in our free leadership certificate program. And we had seen that our leadership workshops, which are typically around 1 hour, we lowered them to one workshop a week, that we had great attendance numbers when it came to that. So we realized that there was a need for people wanting these leadership development programs. At the same time as our spring break programming working really well, our state in California started to get stricter and stricter, and summer looked like we weren't going to have a traditional summer. With that being said, I wanted to plan a workshop series for the students without classes. I figured they either would go 2 ways. First, they were looking for something to fill their time. They didn't have classes to distract them. So I thought they would want to come in through that to have something to fill their day. At the same time, I hoped that Zoom fatigue wouldn't be as hard over the summer, since a lot of them didn't take summer classes. So I was hoping that they weren't going to be sitting hours upon hours in front of the computer, and then me trying to say, join me for another hour every day or so, to be able to connect with them. So I was hoping that they would be interested in coming. So again, we did see successful and unsuccessful programs, but with my experience with the students, it had been overwhelmingly successful when it came to that. We also noticed that the students, we really wanted to plan new and fun topics for them, not topics that they had seen over and over again, because we saw that we were reaching a lot of the same students who are checking out our Instagram, were signing up for our events and programs. So I wanted to make sure that these were not workshops that we just kept recycling. So I did actually make every single workshop was brand new for the LEAD summer program, which I was really proud of being able to have the time and space to be able to do that. So even the students that we traditionally see over and over again at our events were able to come and learn something new. So what is the LEAD Summer Program? I know I keep talking about it. So what is it? So as I mentioned, it stands for Leadership Exploration and Development. It was a 4-week-long program, so a month-long program. I did one in June and one in July as well. We figured that May would be more for graduation, for finals, not really knowing what the end of the semester was going to look like. And then August was going to be a lot about the start of the semester. A lot of our students are very involved on campus. Trainings happen with their student leadership positions. So I wanted to do one in June, see how it went, but always kind of with the plan to have another totally separate month-long event in July as well. So I did do one cohort in June and one in July. There were around 2 to 3 workshops per week. So I'll go over that schedule with you, but I did want to make sure that it was a good balanced amount. So it wasn't like they had to do it every single day, but that they had 1 or 2 to 3 workshops to look forward to each week. Each week also had a theme. So I kind of made an overarching theme for that week and then assigned different workshops throughout that week that fit under that theme. As I had mentioned before, there were different track options that the students could take. They could either do the individual track versus the cohort model. And I'll go way more in depth into that to talk about that. But we really saw that some students wanted to connect with others. They wanted that cohort space. They wanted to feel like they could really learn alongside others and get to know their peers. And some just wanted to log on, learn some great leadership knowledge, learn more about themselves, learn how to create vision for their own leadership, and then log off. The incentive to participate. So I told the students you could come to one workshop or all the workshops. I didn't want to turn anyone away when it came to that, but there was incentives to participate and to come to a certain number of workshops. So as I had said, I run our leadership certificate program. Part of that certificate, there's 6 different components, and one of the components is what we call experiential leadership or experiential learning. This is very out of class experience. So traditionally, the students have to do 2 different events to fulfill the experiential component of the leadership certificate. Traditionally, this is where we'll see students completing our leadership retreat, our leadership conference, being mentors on campus, taking part in specific trainings like ally awareness trainings around campus. And I had included that if the students had attended 7 of the 9 more academic or educational workshops, which you'll see what that means soon, that they were able to get a certificate, which would allow them to fulfill that one component of the experiential learning for the leadership certificate. So a lot of the students were from the leadership certificate. And that's why it was really important to me that these were brand new workshops that they hadn't seen over and over again, since another component of our leadership certificate is that they have to take leadership workshops, very specific designated leadership workshops, like complex styles, true colors, intro to leadership theory, leadership values. So I didn't want to just keep incorporating or recycling those same workshops. Once our June retreat, or not retreat, sorry, our June cohort had taken off and there had been some buzz around campus about the Lead Summer program, I actually had some different areas reach out to me to ask if we can include the Lead Summer program with their own program. So for example, our Honors College, the students have to do a high impact practice in order to fulfill that section for our Honors College. So if they attended the 7 of the 9 workshops as well, they would get the fulfillment for their Honors College component. So I had seen that it was successful. It helped us with our marketing. And it was a great way for me to be able to collaborate with different areas around campus as well. So what were the program learning outcomes? I know there's a lot of text on this slide, so I will somewhat summarize what it says. But this is what I had mentioned to the students that I figured that they would walk away with, so that they would learn the motivation behind leadership, their own personal leadership why, become familiar with different theories, and I had listed some there, recognize characteristics of successful leaders, including some topics that I knew I was going to review with them during the program, take different leadership assessments to help them develop their own personal leadership style. I'll talk more about that soon. Learn about marketing. So we always tell the students, if you have this great experience, that's step 1, but knowing how to market it on a resume, talk about it during job interviews, that's going to be just equally as important. So learn how to market their leadership experience. Connect students with other students in the virtual space. So whether that was from the academic and or cohort, social cohort setting, that was their choice. And then of course, meet staff who would be presenting and learn about different resources, departments, and programs across campus. So once the students completed the program, this is what I had anticipated that they would learn. So next, now, how did we market it? What did the application process look like? So this was one of our marketing pieces. I apologize in advance. Some of our photos are a little bit blurry as I just tried to take screenshots and copy and paste. So this was what our marketing piece looked like. So really talk about Lead Summer program, some of the things that they would learn. A lot of information was on this. I also created video that I posted on our Instagram page, our Student Life and Leadership Instagram page, which is at SLL SDSU, SLL like Student Life and Leadership, at SLL SDSU. And I had recorded what they would be learning. So talking very shortly, briefly about what the program was, how they would go through the month-long program event, how it would be themed per week, and some of the topics that they would talk about, and then that cohort versus individual track. We saw that videos have been very successful on our leadership and service and Student Life and Leadership Instagram page. So things like our leadership retreat conference, we're all creating short videos for those as well. Then for the actual application, I did use a Google form. Here's the very quick short screenshot of that. So I did want to make it a pretty easy application. I know we keep calling it application. I did accept anyone who was a SDSU student who had registered for the Lead Summer program. I just didn't let them do it 2 months in a row. So if they completed the June program, they could not complete the July one since it was the exact same content. But we didn't want to turn any student away. And that was the beauty of having it be virtually, as I'm sure you've seen as well. Our capacity of our events and programs has gone up so much because we've been able to really have as many participants as Zoom will allow. So I did ask them some basic information, ask them to pick the dates and times that worked best for them. So I had drop downs of what times would work, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, things like that. Being very aware that our students were all over the United States and a few even were international. So I just tried to be kind with time zones. So making sure there was nothing too early or too late to not conflict with some of those time zones. So I got this information from them and sent them an acceptance email pretty quickly after they had officially signed up so that they didn't feel like they were waiting and that it was going to be very competitive. So now the program outline. So you can see there in the thicker blue, it's going to be the themed week, and then the bullet points under are the workshops that I went over with them. I'll show you some of the slides for specific workshops, not all of them, but the ones that I thought you might find most interesting. So week one was all about why lead. So I started with a kickoff party. I liked to call it that. It seemed more attractive to the students if we called it a kickoff party. It was really an info session with what they would be learning, what they could expect over the next month. So during that, we talked about dates and times and session topics and things like their attendance, things like choosing the cohort track versus the individual track. And I also wanted this to be an opportunity for them to get to know each other better. So I did a lot of polls, Zoom polls. I did a lot of talked into the chat box. So they all got a chance to actually introduce themselves, say where they were, quote unquote, zooming in from, where they were joining us from. And this is where we saw we had students from Mexico, we had students that were in India, and then a large majority were in the US. A lot still in San Diego or California, a few then dispersed amongst the Midwest and the East Coast. So it was a great way, tried to make it really lively, really exciting so that they were more excited for the program. We also talked about finding your leadership why. So we had a guest speaker come in for this one, someone who oversees our leadership minor and our student affairs master's program. So she came in to talk about why it's important to find your leadership why and how you can start doing that. And then I reviewed with the students 2 theories that we think the students resonate with the most, which is purposeful and servant leadership. There's a good connection tie between the two, but they're also 2 different theories. So talking about purposeful leadership, which fit perfectly with our why lead theme. And then servant leadership is one that our students have really resonated with and isn't one that's as popular or as talked about correctly out there. So we really wanted them to get on page with that. Week 2 was elements of a successful leader. So here I talked about the relational leadership model with them. It's another theory or model that our students really resonate with. The 5 different components of the model are really easy to digest, really easy to comprehend. And the students tend to really like that. It works best for students that are in student organizations, in jobs, work really with that group dynamic as we talk about what's the purpose, what purpose does your organization have? What process do they go through? Is your organization ethical? Is it inclusive? How does it empower members? So it was really interactive where they were able to reflect on that. For imposter syndrome or imposter phenomena, I had a guest speaker come in, and he talked with the students all about this idea of imposter syndrome, something that a lot of students really know about, but didn't know that there was a term that was associated with it. So for a lot of our students, that was a great light bulb moment for them, an aha moment where they're like, wow, I've always felt this way. Did I deserve this? Did this, was it a mistake that I was accepted to this program, something like that? They just didn't really understand that there was somewhat of a science behind it, that there was a whole term about it. And then one that I had created specifically for the virtual space, leading through a time of change, was one of, I think, the workshop topics that was the most successful, and it's been the one that has been requested singularly around campus, around our campus, the most. So leading through a time of change, I talk about the change model, talk about the different types of responses to change, and then also some common reactions that we have, and some somewhat myths, or some different ways to combat that. So that one was really great, really relevant, of course. And the students, they had mentioned that they didn't cope well with change. They didn't like change. And I assured them, unfortunately, in this 1 hour workshop, I'm not going to make you love change, but we're going to see the importance of adapting, and why being able to adapt throughout that change is really what's going to get you to thrive as a business or as a organization and leadership. Week 3 was all about your personal leadership style. I feel very fortunate that I've been able to, through my job, get a few different trainings or certifications under my belt. So I am Myers-Briggs certified. I'm also a Clifton Strengths coach. So with that, I'm able to go through the Myers-Briggs personality assessment with the students. So we purchased the real assessment. We're able to send out those codes to students so they were able to take the assessment. Then I do a debrief meeting with them. So we'll talk about, obviously, the history of Myers-Briggs, why we incorporate it into our leadership workshops, as well as take a deep dive into each dichotomy. So what's the difference between extroversion, introversion, and then the other 3 dichotomies as well, and really have them reflect on if they think it accurately describes them, and so on. Similarly with Clifton Strengths, so using Clifton Strengths to discover your leadership strengths. So talk about the importance of positive psychology and why leading from a strengths perspective is actually really beneficial versus leading from what we're doing wrong or focusing on that, and how that can be really toxic for your organization. We also, I worked with the students to have them be able to really elaborate upon their strengths, feel comfortable talking about their strengths, since that's one of the most basic interview questions is, what are your strengths? But more importantly, connect them with experiences and anecdotes from their leadership positions. So how have you seen yourself using this strength, and so on. So we did a lot of breakout rooms with that. I had them practice some mock interview questions with each other after they really understood what their strengths were. The last and final week was all about marketing your leadership. As I had mentioned in the beginning, you have all this great student leadership experience, but how you actually market it to others is where the students are going to get their jobs. So for this one, I partnered with Career Services to talk about high impact resumes and cover letters. So how do you actually successfully talk about your leadership experiences? So instead of just saying, I was a student orientation leader, really elaborating and saying, what did you do in that position? Even something like taking the lead summer program, where does that go on your resume? Things like that. Next, I collaborated with a former assistant dean for the College of Business, and she talked about building your leadership toolbox, all the way from basics to, which would be more attire, preparing for an interview, all the way to some more advanced topics like answering those interview questions, some resume pointers as well. And then finally, we had our lead summer program wrap up. This was similarly to the kickoff. I tried to make it a very fun celebratory session where the students got their certificates if they had completed 7 of the 9 academic workshops. So I consider the academic workshops the meaty ones, so not including the kickoff, not including the wrap up, but those content heavy workshops in between. So this was a great time for us to really dive in and talk about, reflect on what they learned. They got to take some Zoom polls on what their favorite topics were, what their takeaways were. They got to share some feedback with me, and then they got their certificates, the students that earned them. Again, I'm sorry it's a little bit blurry, but I did want to show you the kind of intro slide to a few of my presentations. So I tried to make them very fun and festive. So this was for that kickoff party or info session, which again, it really was. So this was our first workshop that I presented to them through the program. Then on servant and purposeful leadership, this was the one where we had focused on those two different theories, really talking about why it's important to be a purposeful leader and why our students really relate to servant leadership. Next was the relational leadership model. So this was the one where I had discussed the leadership model with them, and we had discussed how their organizations or jobs or wherever they felt like they were interacting with others in a group dynamic type of setting, how they were able to accomplish or not accomplish the different components of the model. The leading in a time of change was the workshop I said was our most requested, even outside the Lead Summer program, that I found to be most successful. So when I talked about the change model, as well as different responses, reactions to change, and also talking about adaptability. And I did different case studies with the students on businesses that had to adapt over time. Even some common ones like Google and Facebook and Apple, Netflix, the ones that the students know, that they know so much about, but didn't realize that they actually started with a very different intent, all the way to some local restaurants that we have here in San Diego. What's my personality style was my presentation using the Myers-Briggs personality assessment. And similarly, leading with strengths was my presentation using the Clifton Strengths Assessment. So now I wanted to talk with you all about the different tracks that I had offered. So the individual versus cohort track. So the individual track I thought would be an attractive option to students that didn't really want to interact, didn't find that their own Zoom interactions were as successful as they had hoped. So for them, it was to attend the workshops and gain the important information to better their leadership skills. So they would log on at the time of the workshops, for the workshops I had just reviewed with you. And they really interacted with the participants and presenters through those scheduled workshops. If any of you know me, I really like to make interactive workshops. So I do like to include Zoom polls. I always had questions in the chat box. There's some very interesting research out there for if participants use the chat box and participate within the first few minutes of your workshop, they're so much more engaged throughout the entire workshop. They're paying attention if they participate just in those first few minutes. So I use that research that's out there to really make sure that I was engaging the students, even if they were on the individual track. For the cohort model, they got all those benefits of the individual track, but I also had built in some social and educational events in addition to the ones that I had just outlined with you. So I had a whole different schedule of cohort track events, which I'm going to review with you. There was two different types, as I mentioned, the social ones and then the educational ones. So these were shorter, oftentimes 30 minutes, sometimes an hour long workshops or events that took place in addition to all of the workshops that I had just reviewed with you. And these were really meant to provide that opportunity and space for the students to connect in a more fun way with each other, and really allow for them to bond with others in a way that was more intentionally designed to be successful in order to do that. So yes, it's nice to type in a chat box where you're from, to answer a few polls, questions on Zoom, but you'll see that the cohort track, it was much, much more interactive, whether it was discussion-based or purely social through games. So for the cohort track, I also divided it. There wasn't a theme for each week, but I was able to divide it into the 4 weeks. So you'll see, typically I always had a cohort and an educational session each week. For each cohort session, I actually have some sample screenshots of the different programs, websites I use. I found all these to be really successful. They're all free, ones that I had stumbled upon or were recommended to me from colleagues or friends to be successful in the virtual space as well. So for week one, my cohort, so my fun, cohort social event for them was Scribble, which is online Pictionary. I'll show you a screenshot. If you haven't visited this website, I highly recommend it. It's a great way to connect with students and really just friends, even if you wanted to do it on your own time, where you get a word, no one else knows which word I have, and I have to draw that word, and then people type in what word they think that I'm going to be drawing. So very similar to Pictionary. For my educational event that week, I did do just a leadership certificate info session. Once students found out that completing this Lead Summer program was part of our leadership certificate, if they wanted it to be, a lot of them were really interested in what is the leadership certificate. So I did lead an info session for them. Week two, we did an online virtual group puzzle. I, again, will show you a screenshot of that. It was a great way for us to be able to work towards something. So everyone's contributing. It's an online virtual puzzle, one puzzle that everyone is able to try to complete together. Since it wasn't as much, it was concentrating, but it was pretty quiet in the background, I was able to very intentionally bring up some topics that the students were interested in discussing. Some fun kind of imagination topics, like if you could travel anywhere, where would you go? What's some new skill that you might have learned during quarantine or during our time with COVID, and then some educational things too, like people had then started bonding and talked about the classes that they were taking or where they had studied abroad in the past. So it was a great way for them to connect in that way. For my educational topic that week, I did a crash course on self-care, but I didn't want it to be the typical self-care. So I found a great TED Talk where I was able to show them the TED Talk, and it talks about self-care from a very holistic experience. So way more than just get sleep and exercise and eat healthy, but she talks about the different dimensions of self-care, and even as an advocate, how you need to make sure that you have self-care when it comes to that, and talking about how self-care is really making sure that your whole being, whatever that means to you, is taken care of. For week 3, I did some Kahoot! SDSU trivia. So Kahoot! Is a free website out there. Again, I'll show you a screenshot soon. And I just created an SDSU trivia for that. And I tried to choose some pretty hard questions. SDSU were pretty lucky to have some fun trivia questions that you can come up with, including a lot of movies were filmed on our campus. So talking about that, also talking about some statistics. So things like which major had the most graduates last year, or what was the average GPA, what were our school colors before they changed to our current school colors, things like that the students might not know as easily as some of those other facts that are more obvious to them. For my educational crash course, I showed again a TED Talk on how to have a better conversation. And it was a great way for us to really reflect on what can we do better, what do we do well already, what's something that you're going to practice over the next week when it comes to trying to have a better conversation. So the students really liked that one. It was very tangible for them. They were able to walk away with some very easy and obvious things to work on. For week 4, I reviewed task management with the students. So really wanted to make it different from time management, and talk a little bit more about task management and the importance of that, how to prioritize those topics, what does it look like in the virtual space versus some task management in a more traditional environment. And then that week I only had that because we also had, for our more cohort session, we had our final wrap up. So there was already a lot of content that week for them. So now feel free to take screenshots of this. I love all of these cohort socials that I did. So this is our Scribble or online Pictionary. So as you can see, there's the different players there. One player has the word and they're drawing that. And then everyone else is trying to guess what the word would be. There's also clues that are given, so you can see up here on the top, it says ST blank. So as the time goes on, kind of similar to Hangman, the letters start getting filled in, and then everyone's guessing on the side what this word would be. So I assume that this screenshot would be spy. And then, so you can find the website there at scribble.io, a free website that we use a lot at SDSU because it's pretty fun. The students love it and they love drawing that. My next one was everyone working on that group puzzle together. So if you see there at the bottom, there's the website, the jigsawpuzzles.io, and then slash that up if you want to create a new one. You can choose from many different images. So there's things everywhere from street art to animals to food. And then everyone basically sees this exact page that you're seeing. And then you have the ability to drag and drop some pieces. They kind of click into place when you get the piece to be correct. There's also a way to keep score of who does the most puzzle pieces. I didn't want it to be competitive, so I just ignored that feature. But it is kind of a nice way for you to see points if you want to know who put together the most puzzle pieces. Then Kahoot is a very popular free trivia site. So it was kahoot.it. This was the trivia that I did for SDSU specifically. There's some preloaded trivia. So if you didn't have the time or didn't want to make one, you can search if your school has one, if your town has one, if your state has one, or if you just want to choose random topics. But it's also pretty easy to create your own. So this was how I did the trivia through kahoot.it. Then here was my wrap up and incentives. So this was my presentation beginner slide for our Lead Summer Program wrap up, where I was able to do some of those reflections with the students as well. And they did get a certificate. So I tried to make it look fun, something that they would want to maybe Instagram, good advertisement for us. So obviously where it says your name here, I put their name. And everyone was very supportive. So I was able to give a shout out to each student individually. And of course, everyone was, doing their virtual claps or gave the clap reaction when it came to actually congratulating each other. So they did get this certificate of completion. As I mentioned, it counted as a high impact practice for different areas around campus, whether that was my own leadership certificate program, our honors college, and a few other areas also gave some credit for students for completing this. We had around 50 students complete the certificate in for the June cohort, and around the same number for July. And we had more students participate, but unfortunately not all of them received the certificate. But we had a very high rate of students who did. I would say around 80% of students participating did get the certificate both times. So we did have over 100 students participate, and around 80% of the students received the certificate. So for some feedback and changes, here's a testimonial from a student basically saying that this program helps them realize their areas of strength and weaknesses, and that they felt that they were able to have a better direction, be able to adapt during this hectic and crazy time in our lives. So it was great to hear many of these type of testimonials. So you can read that one on your own. And then I wanted to share, I also asked them for some Likert scale statistics. So things like the presenters were knowledgeable about the topics presented. So 84% strongly agreed, 15% agreed. I did have one student who disagreed on all of the topics. We always have that one. And then no one strongly disagreed on any of the topics. So the presenters were knowledgeable about the topics presented. Being part of the Lead Summer Program was worth my time. You can see there overwhelmingly they said yes, and I would recommend the Lead Summer Program to other students at SDSU. Another overwhelming response strongly agreed to that one, and both strongly agreed and agreed was very high. So it was great to see that their feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Some changes that they had recommended, a few students were very confused by the cohort track versus individual track. I did think it was a great selling point. to students to say that it was the opportunity to select. But I do think that if I were to do this over again, I would just offer the cohort track to everyone and just let them know that it wouldn't affect their attendance. So if a student missed a cohort track event, so whether it was an educational or social cohort track, it didn't impact their overall attendance. So I think that would have been helpful to just send them the links. I basically sent an email every Monday with the links for that week for Zoom. And then I sent a separate one to the students in the cohort. So I think it could have been combined into one. If they didn't want to go to any of the cohort events, they could have just ignored that section of the email. I think it was confusing for them to figure out, do I need to sign up for this in addition, anything like that. Also, a few students had requested that I send the links and information to them further in advance. As I mentioned, I did this every Monday. We did have workshops on Monday, so I think it was a little bit stressful for them to get the link that day. In the kickoff/info session, I gave them all the dates and times, just not the actual Zoom links, because I figured they might not remember the exact Zoom link 4 weeks later. So they did know the dates and times of everything. I just sent the actual Zoom links on the Monday, but we know our students. I don't think some of them had remembered when the dates and times were. So for them, they were realizing that there was an event that day, was their perception of that. So I do think it would be helpful for me to send those links earlier, even if it was Friday before Friday afternoon, and then saying that these are the links for the next week would have been helpful. So that is my presentation. I wanted to make sure I can stay connected with you if you liked any of these workshop topics and wanted me to come and present to your students. I'd be happy to do so. So you can either email me or find me on social media. So there is my Instagram and there's my email. So my email is cweiner@sdsu.edu. I'd love to connect. Just let me know you listen to my presentation. And if there's a topic, let's say you want leading in a time of change, I'd be happy to virtually present that to your students. I also wanted to share, I know I had been mentioning that I coordinate our leadership conference as well. We have our SDSU Leadership Summit conference coming up, and there's a few ways for you to get involved with that too. We have a regional advisory board. So if you're interested in serving on our regional advisory board, which looks great on your resume, we would love to have you join our regional advisory board. So with that, send me an email that you'd be interested. What the members of our regional advisory board do is you learn more details about the conference. You also help to review proposals and let us know your feedback on which proposals should go through and which proposals you think would be most beneficial. And then we also ask for you to market the event to your students. We're happy that we believe that the conference will be free of cost this year. Normally there is a cost, but we understand the times that our students are experiencing right now. So if you market it to your students, it wouldn't be like you're promoting something that costs a lot of money. It's just an opportunity for them. And the conference will take place in February over a few different days. So the Friday the 19th to Sunday the 21st, different dates and times. And we are the premier leadership conference on the West Coast. So again, great to have that information there that you were on that regional advisory board, but also great to be able to promote that to your students as another opportunity for them. So you can email me if you're interested in serving on the regional advisory board or you want more information on our conference. If not, you can just Google SDSU Leadership Summit and it'll take you directly to our website. So with that, I am going to open it up to any question and answer that you all might have. So I'm going to stop this presentation and start and be there with my next presentation for you all to be able to answer any questions. So thank you all so much for joining. I hope you found it beneficial, and I hope that you're now more motivated to create your own LEAD program, whether it's over the summer or during the academic year. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Student Organization Summit. If you're watching this live, feel free to reference the schedule for the day and use the link in the schedule to access a Q&A room where you can ask questions or chat with the presenters from this workshop. If they didn't list a Q&A link, or you're watching this video after the event, thank you for your interest in the Student Organization Summit.